Welcome back, you here with Goldberg. Today we'll be talking about Roosh V and his static evolution. Now, this is a character I never followed as a fanboy or acolyte, more so checked up on occasionally. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them on the Internet.com. About maybe a year ago, I read his classic Bang, which is How to Pick Up Women. And, there were some lines which I said, okay, I could believe this might work on a somewhat buzzed female. Now, when he's describing having sex with chicks, it never seems as though he's enjoying it. It's almost a mechanical process because he's doing it for his living. And there are some instances, not just in this text, but others, where he describes having sex with a chick, and you're going, is this supposed to be satire or you trying to be alpha? Because if a woman's going, stop, stop, it's hurting me, stop, I gotta get away anyway, it does sort of ride that line. There's a legal term for it, but if you mention it on YouTube, you probably get taken down. Again, I let other people have that discussion, but I've sometimes wondered with these characters, are you just trying to impress other men, or are you in fact committing a crime? Hard to say, I suppose. More recently, I read the book Lady, which is his attempt to give similar advice, although to women. And in this case, he talks about women almost as though you're a guy making a female player character in Skyrim or Oblivion, like this size, these abilities, this appearance, this demeanor. Not necessarily a person with a lot of background interacting with the opposite sex. Now, that could just be a wrong impression I have, but that's how it came off. Attuned to an alien talking about human females as opposed to a guy who's interacted and bedded many of them. And then about 2 weekends ago, I completed his latest, which is American Pilgrim. Essentially, after he became a Christian, he traveled the United States giving testimony, and this is a compilation of those experiences. So let me discuss what I liked first. There's a moment where he speculates you've got this Hispanic dude working at a hand car wash, low wage, long hours. Maybe he doesn't have the same opportunities to be a degenerate in sin like Roosh did. And I think there's some merit to that. You take a Russian serf back in the day, they don't have a lot of upward potential in society. They have to work just to survive. They're less likely to be as much of a degenerate as, suppose, the Tsarina, who some people believe was getting banged by Rasputin. Not confirmed, but there is a decent possibility. He also notes that there's a lot of guys who God might withhold grace from them because they're actively still in sin. And I think we're all guilty of this to some degree. To the extent that, you might be banging a chick and then saying, oh, I'm Christian, or these guys say Christian conservative red pillar. All right, I'm also into PUA. What? And this is a real deal. Look at this, nice guy seduction, dating women. Yeah, he had to make the qualifier that it's women. Masculinity and Christian pickup. God forbid someone wouldn't know what you're talking about there. I also got a clearer picture of the monastic Orthodox perspective on how worldly things can take you away from God. So let's say you're obsessed with delicious food. That pleasure is distracting you from being focused on the man upstairs. If you're into sex or wanderlust or riches, all those experiences or possessions can be misleading you or taking you in a different direction. Now, I'm sure that the secular clapback would be that a lot of these ortho bros, they talk about how Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, WF wants to make them slaves, but then they have no problem laying themselves prostrate in front of the supernatural deity. Nevertheless, I did gain value from that because I think sometimes too many people who are religious, they do it as a weekend warrior thing, and it's not actually part of their life. They don't want to give anything up, make any sacrifices. I knew a dude who's extremely religious, like more of a Protestant perspective, but he's all into all the technology, the Alexa, all the conveniences, all the high living. Of course, he went and got the pincushion, didn't want to make any sacrifices, even though he's extremely pious. So it's definitely food for thought, if nothing else. As for the rest, it's a mixed bag, and after reading and observing Roosh for some years, I've come to the conclusion that he's a man perpetually at war with himself. He hated being the short, awkward Arab teenager who couldn't get women, so then he adopted this slavish devotion to PUA to a degree that's somewhat cringy, whether to make a career or feels though he was truly masculine. He complains about the Care Bear bankers, but in many respects, he's a living embodiment of them, a Middle Eastern guy spreading degeneracy, leading people into hedonism around the world so he can live this bohemian lifestyle where he doesn't have to do hard labor like a traditional Christian peasant. He doesn't have to make sacrifices. Indeed, when he considers being a monk, he admits he doesn't want to have to follow those rules or give up a lot of these conveniences, niceties, possessions. He made a decent chunk of money after he was moving away from PUA, doing the masculinity meetups around the world. But even with this trip, I'm thinking he's just kind of a traveling preacher. But he was charging some of these folks at his meetups almost one a week for 5 months on the road, $250 to talk with them. So if you get 4 guys doing that each time, that's $1,000 that you're raking in on the road, which is pretty good for a guy who's renounced worldly things. So I thought that was interesting that he is against the Care Bears, but he is in many respects, at least spiritually, a Care Bear. He condemns the pleasure-obsessed culture of degeneracy that we see with the white homosexual. But then he was promoting the idea that Western men, especially Western white men, would go and live hedonistically overseas, pumping and dumping women for easy sex. He complains about ass culture in the West, but every time he sees a girl in this book, unless he's prescribed them to the trad category, he's like, oh, I had to avert my eyes because of the tightness of her pants around her butt. Or in this state, I was happy to see they emphasize the life-giving breasts and not the defecating ass. You're going, why do you need to do this? You're a Christian. Yeah, we're all going to have some struggles. You're all going to have lusts, but is it really necessary to keep bringing it up? It seems almost just a weird fixation for some reason. He also indicts black culture, but his forums for the longest time fostered content encouraging black men to be stereotypical so they could pick up women in Europe and South America. He doesn't like the Muslim refugees and immigrants in Europe, but he's the quintessential Middle Eastern guy who goes to Eastern Europe to fulfill his sexual fetishes. So it's like he's angry about things that in many respects he is advanced and he's the embodiment of. He claims that he has no right to judge fellow Christians or say that his beliefs are better, but on this forum it's become where if you're not Orthodox or you're not a certain type of Orthodox, you can't even participate in certain discussions. Entire forums have been deleted because they're not promoting that specific, Putinist Orthodox view of the world and society. So maybe it's just a function of getting old, but I thought it was kind of weird. And it brings me to this question I wanted to, share with you guys. When these guys, as in these PUAs, they hit middle age, and they have their road to Damascus moment, they decide to become Christian. In the case of Roosh, he did unpublish some of his game books, but that was partially because Amazon forced him to, and I'm not sure that he actually forfeited the earnings. So I'm sure he's still able to live a somewhat bohemian manner based upon the savings that he has. And I imagine they're pretty substantial unless he's faced many legal difficulties. So now he can say, okay, I'm coming to God. But is it really about humbling yourself, or is it more of an ego trip? Victor Pride is a guy, he ended up admitting, after he did all that self-improvement, supposedly became a millionaire, he said, I was just manipulating people. And now he wanted to be a Christian monk. But are you giving up those ill-gotten gains, or are you just saying, okay, my life's taken care of, now I can follow God? Because if Roosh, let's say, when he was 21, had just started talking about Christianity on the internet, maybe he would have made a living, but I'm sure the market was not as big as the red pill market is and was for that sort of thing. So you see how it's not to necessarily undermine the possibility or question it, but I do have to question it, because your average religious person will just roll over and say, oh yeah, because they have that kind of redemption message. Any Muslim, any Christian, yeah, welcome to the fold. But they're not considering what are the motivations of this person. Throughout this book, Roosh is constantly saying, he sees a girl, oh, in my old life, I would have spat some game and taken her back to my place for easy sex. You're saying, why are you fixated? Is that because you want to remind the audience that you've changed, or is it to remind your ego that you're not an incel? And this is like a sacrifice you have to make for yourself, because really you're just an expert at alpha tricks. Yeah, it's just something that I have to occasionally wonder about, I suppose. So this brings us to the strangest part of the book. He gets into contact with this girl who's mid-20s, similar ethnic and religious background, appears to be a virgin. They meet up, they click personality-wise. He's getting excited. Could this be the one that God has ordained for me to marry? and then the hammer drops. See, this chick has a tattoo beneath her neck, upper chest area. And that there's just no way she would have to wear a turtleneck even when she's in the shower because I would always be reminded of the girls I slept with. I'm thinking, seriously, dude? You are in your 40s. A much younger woman who is somewhat tradish in nature has been sent your way. You admit it might be by God, but you're turning it down because of ink on the skin. Now, I could see if, who knows, she had an abortion, she'd been with 100 dudes, she had a pincushion, she has 2.5 kids with 3 Tyrones and sometimes Jadam. That would be somewhat more understandable from your dignity sake. But having a tattoo, don't you believe in the saving grace of Jesus Christ? And yet, she can't overcome that. You supposedly have been saved from your life of debauchery, but a woman having a tattoo is just a bridge too far. This is where I go back to, is it just ego for these guys? It has nothing to do with actual humility and redemption. I'm not saying I know. It's just something that I have to, again, have these discussions. And more to the point, if they really believe that Jesus Christ can save people, why don't they go back and find a girl that they pumped and dumped, minister to her, bring her to the light, and then marry her? Yeah, it's not a good idea to turn a hoe into a housewife. We all know that rule, but if you truly believe that God transforms people, why are you then creating all these ridiculous standards when it comes to someone who would be with you after you've lived in such a degenerate fashion? Now, if he had been a Christian at the age of 18, I understand it. But you have been a degenerate sinner, and you're saying, oh, well, my standards are so ridiculously high to where I'm essentially going to have now this chaotic quest where I'll never be able to get married. I'll never be a monk either. I'll just be some influencer for the sake of, I guess, money and some clout. Who knows? Maybe I have it wrong. Maybe you guys think that, in fact, these guys are sincere. But let me know, is it absolutely genuine? Is it ego? Is it about grifting? Is it because they've hit middle age, they don't have the same energy or SMV to get women, and so now they've found another path? I want to know your thoughts. 2 of the books, the ones that are still in print, I'll put links to them in case you want to check them out.